Here are 4 ways that the English translations of the Bible may have changed the origin story of Eve. The first is the translation of Eve coming from Adam's rib bone. What the text actually says is that Eve came from a side of Adam. So in rabbinic literature, you'll see this imagined as Adam and Eve being split from equal halves. The second is the translation of Eve being made as a helper for Adam. The Hebrew word here is actually closer to the word rescuer. Then you may remember the line in English that as a punishment, Eve's desire will be for her husband. But other translations, like the ESV, say that Eve's desire will be contrary to her husband. And lastly, there's that popular idea that painful childbirth is the result of the curse of sin. But the plain interpretation of the text is that there will be difficulty in conception.
Ladies, all I'm gonna ask is, who do you think made those translations?
A massive exodus of people leaving churches in general. But
Right.
one of the most religiously engaged groups that's growing right now is young men attending more conservative churches. Women are leaving in larger numbers than ever before.
If you want an easy example for why religion is by men for men, look at how it deals with menstruation. If you are Hindu and on your period, you cannot enter temples, perform pujas, or even touch sacred objects. In Shintoism in Japan, if you are on your period, you cannot enter sacred shrines or perform rituals. In many kinds of Islam, if you're on your period, you cannot pray or enter mosques. There are still some religious sites that will not even allow women of menstruating age. The Sabarimala temple in India finally reversed that through a court case in 2018, so very recently. Some Christian Orthodox traditions say that you can't handle the Eucharist if you're on your period. In some Buddhist texts, because women are impure because they have menstruation, they have to reincarnate as a man to achieve enlightenment. We have records of theological debates in medieval Christianity where they're trying to decide whether menstruating women can handle the Bible or participate in theological discussions while they're on their period. Judaism, of course, has many rules around menstruation, and you have to do a ritual to purify yourself after menstruation. You're not allowed to touch your husband during it. It's a whole thing. Across Buddhism and Hinduism, we have ideas that the woman's body is more impure, and so it's going to make their spiritual progress harder. But of all the religions that have told me that I'm impure in some way because my body does something that is very natural to my body, the one honestly that hurts the most is Jesus. Because when Jesus bleeds and Jesus gets blood everywhere, it is sacred and it is life-giving and it's life-affirming, and we're going to do all of these rituals to show how life-affirming this blood is. It's sacred blood. And there's something to me just so hypocritical about women's bodies that create life and blood being a part of that. But yet when a man does it, it's sacred. And then when a woman does it, it's unclean and it's impure and you're less than and your body is less than and you're going to have a hard time becoming enlightened and you're going to be less spiritual. You're going to have less access to spirituality. But when Jesus bleeds, that blood is okay. Jesus's blood did nothing and is praised as everything. But when a woman bleeds and that actually is tied to her ability to create life, it's impure. So not only did the Christian God take everything, he creates everything without female, but Jesus also took the blood too. And then the women who bleed and actually create life are less than. And that is just such bullshit. There are a lot of things about Jesus that I like, but really what I hate the most is I just had someone yesterday say, I love Jesus because he's the perfect balance of masculine and feminine. And I said, that's great, but we only accept femininity or life-giving blood as sacred when it comes from a man. And that actually does have a cost for women if we only accept femininity when it comes with a penis. So I'm just gonna leave that there and walk away.
Or enter mosques. I was just thinking about this because tell me why the rules are so arbitrary. So Ramadan just started and my sister's friend is Muslim and she said, well, during Ramadan, because you're unclean, if you have your period, you don't have to fast. And I was like, okay, a win is a win, but you still have to cook. I was like, isn't that funny? Men say you're too impure to pray. Literally cannot commune with God because you're so filthy, but you are still clean enough to do everything around the house. The Quran literally says everything except, lay with your husband. And I've seen so many women on the app in this past week talking about how they're not having the same experience in Ramadan as the men, because for men, it's a time of spirituality and focus, but women have to do all the same things they always do. They're taking care of the house. They're fixing these feasts on an empty stomach all day, every day. And you can't even focus and do your prayer and everything right because you are serving all these men who make it about them. If you don't do the food right or you don't cook exactly what they want, and apparently what they want is very labor intensive, they're going to get angry and just ruin the whole day. And please go back and follow No Nonsense Spirituality, who I'm stitching. But like she said, the one that hurts the most for me is Jesus, because I myself was raised Baptist. As a Black Baptist, we didn't have those same kind of encoded religious instructions against touching things or being seen as impure, but it's very cultural. And my sisters know what I'm talking about. You know, you go to church and you sing, oh, the blood of Jesus, I know it was the blood. The blood will never lose its power, but the blood over the communion. And then you are told when you get home that if you leave out clean pads, you're some sort of unclean harlot. We literally sing, worship, honor the blood of Jesus, but the blood of women is so disregarded. And further than that, when I was a girl, which was not long ago, I just had my birthday yesterday. So when I was a girl in the 90s, women were still not preaching in my tradition. I grew up with ministers saying they would never ordain a woman, and that was commonplace. And it's no coincidence, in my opinion, that a lot of women who rose to prominence in the past couple of decades as ministers, as visionaries, as conduits of God, were then in abusive relationships, like Juanita Bynum and Yolanda Adams. Oftentimes, the church will break you down to nothing. Remember when Juanita Bynum came out, her whole message was no more sheets. Your entire spirituality as a woman is wrapped up in what you do or don't do with your vagina. That's all women are ever preached at about, celibacy and staying pure for your husband and serving a man. And then she had that huge elaborate wedding on TBN. God had finally sent her mate, and he had to marry both her hands and give her those 2 huge rings, all for him to later be exposed beating her in the parking lot of an Atlanta hotel where strangers had to pull him off. And what did the church do about it? Yes, nothing. And her husband was a minister. The church never sat him down, never punished him. He pled guilty. There were witnesses, and they say he pushed her down, kicked and stomped her, choked her. And he continued to have a church and live his life. She divorced him, and that sparked a huge conversation about the role of the church in DV, which still has not come very far. I remember there was a feature in Essence, and one woman who had been in a violent relationship said that, the church posits that you're supposed to suffer in life. And a lot of women think that this is just the suffering, their marriage, their abusive marriage. And they're made to think that by the church. And I completely agree. And there's that cultural component again. Oh, don't call the police on another Black man. If you want a better life as a woman, the first thing you should decenter is religion, particularly the Abrahamic ones. And I covered this in my upcoming book. It's all about you decentering men and others for a better life. In chapter 2, the religion of self first. Because I've been telling you all for years, anything men say, believe the opposite. And religion has been the ultimate destiny swap. They took away all your power and left you with the work. So men have made themselves the life givers. They're aligned with the ultimate authority. They're the natural heads according to them. And then they tell you, after having kept the power of literacy from most women in most cultures, oh, the Holy Book says that you are number 2. The Holy Book says you're underneath me. The Holy Book says you're supposed to submit to me. The Holy Book says you're unclean. And it says the things that you do daily, like caring for your children, cooking, cleaning, are either unimportant or actually have no spiritual merit, because that labor is invisible to men. The first time I ever recall having a real problem with this is when I was a girl, and you hear the story of Jesus, Mary, and Martha. Jesus loved to visit his friend Lazarus and his 2 sisters, Mary and Martha, and he would go over to their house and hang out, enjoying Martha's hospitality, because Martha was tirelessly cooking and cleaning and doing everything she could to entertain Jesus in a lavish, hospitable way. Mary was sitting at Jesus' feet, soaking up the sunshine and listening to him teach. And when Martha got overwhelmed and she asked Jesus to tell Mary to help her, he said, Martha, Martha, you're upset and worried about many things, but few things are needed. Only one. Mary has chosen what's better, and it's not going to be taken away from her. So in other words, what you're doing is just temporary. It's not important. All while sitting there eating the food that Martha had made. As a child, it really pissed me off, because the thing is, Jesus, according to the Bible, had the power to create food from nothing. So why didn't you whisk away Martha's chores so she can sit here and learn too? What you did was dismiss her, devalue her work while still enjoying the fruits of her labor, and tell her the problem was all in her head. That was so disrespectful, because remember, guys, Jesus had a posse of 12 people he traveled around with. He had a whole entourage. Imagine grinding the grain into flour for the bread, baking the bread, fetching water by hand, etc., for all of these people. And then you're being told what you are doing has no merit. It's always going to be like that in spirituality, because the men at the center of it have never run a household. Jesus never had any children. And if he ever needed anything, he could either create it from a miracle or somebody else gave it to him, like the donkey he rode into the city. And if you continue to imbibe religion that teaches you that what you have to contribute to the world is not worthwhile, you will always feel like you're less than. Unless your spirituality is woman-centric and has a place to acknowledge the divine feminine, you are going to be made to feel as though your womanhood is something for you to overcome, that you have to get rid of Eve's sinful nature, or that you can't be disrespectful and lead a bad life. Like Jezebel, the most important thing you can be is pure like the Virgin Mary. And the most important thing you can do is be an appendage to a man. And through that, you might make some kind of difference in life, like Ruth or Queen Esther, or Abigail or Sarah. Are you touching and agreeing with men in the Bible bonding over trading the bodies of women young enough to be their daughters? Over the fact that the Bible and the Torah say that for a woman to avoid being labeled unclean if she's assaulted, she should marry her rapist? But it's cool if he doesn't marry her as long as he pays her father for what he took. The worst curse is the one you put on yourself. So be careful what you sit under and allow yourself to be taught as spirituality, as the word of God. And believe whatever you want. Worship any way you choose. Believe in any holy book you choose. But be aware that men kept women purposefully out of education, away from literacy. Only the highest born ladies in most cultures had access to those things because men didn't want to be able to read these texts for themselves. And now they've been translated so often in favor of men, you don't know what they originally said. Don't take anything on blind faith.
Oh,
That's
absolutely,
it.
yes. Religion is a big reason why a lot of people stay in toxic relationships. And don't mind my cat, y'all. Like this person says, like, a lot of people stay because they don't believe in divorce. What God has brought together, may no man tear apart. Look, this is not me trying to disrespect anybody's religion or anything like that, y'all. But my true belief is that I don't think God put you here to suffer with a toxic, narcissistic, abusive partner. Because that toxic, narcissistic, abusive partner will absolutely tell you that God don't like divorce, that God don't believe in you leaving because no matter what I did, it doesn't mean you should divorce me or you should break free of this marriage or anything like that. They will weaponize your religion or your cultural beliefs to keep you there with them, no matter how unhappy you are. So when my wife had left, this is like 4 years ago, I read the whole Bible from beginning to end because I was so lost. You know what I mean? And I was just like, one of the messages that I got from the Bible is that God didn't put you here to be unhappy your whole life. You know what I mean? A narcissist would tell you like, God, just because you're unhappy right now in real life doesn't mean you won't be happy in the kingdom with God later on. So again, y'all, I'm not like, this is not me trying to trash anybody's religion, but just, for me, again, it's okay for you to pick you. It's okay for you to choose you. It's okay for you to choose happiness and not stew in a toxic relationship dynamic. Because I know sometimes like your family would discard you, your family would get rid of you, your religion, your church would excommunicate you if you get divorced. Your friends and people will kick you out or not talk to you anymore. It's tough. I understand that, y'all. But don't, like I said, it's a tough decision, but it's okay to choose happiness. It's okay, you know what I mean, to take the next step.
Religion is masculine. This is why they tell you that God is a man, because masculine mind, man. It actually blocks you from your heart.
Christianity was 100% written by men for men. It's amazing when some Christian women are not able to connect the dots when they say all men wrote the Bible and they also write about men being closer to God, being above women. That is not a coincidence. That didn't just happen. If all men wrote the Bible, they're going to be writing it in favor of themselves. That is not a far-fetched thing to say. That's why I say things like equality and feminism don't go with Christianity. And a lot of Christian women get upset when I talk like this, and if that is the type of life you want to live below your husband, that's fine. I'm not saying you're not allowed to live that way. But I personally am not okay with being seen as a second-class citizen, as being less than. I'm also not okay with the kind of relationship that breeds. Because I want a partner, somebody who makes decisions with me, not somebody who makes decisions for me. And I cannot begin to tell you the amount of times I've heard growing up, the man is the head of the household, he makes the decisions, he has the final say. I'm just the side character to his story. I'm just his sidekick. I'm not my own individual person with my own individual thoughts and decision making. They pretend like men are more logical, better leaders, better decision makers, and essentially say, you're a woman, know your place. Like I said, I know some people are okay with this, or they think they're okay with it. I think that a lot of women in this sphere have been convinced that this is what they want. But when I think of a relationship or a marriage, I want a partnership. Someone who is my partner, not my authoritative figure. My partner is not my parent. They aren't above me. They don't make decisions over me. They make decisions with me. And I think to pretend like they are above you and pretend like they are smarter, more logical, closer to God than you is doing yourself a disservice.
She's not gonna let me go home if I don't ask this question because she can't ask it. She just wanted to know why women are not allowed to preach in the church, and if a woman feels that she has the gift of preaching, why isn't she allowed?
1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 12. I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. So, because the Bible says so.
The Bible says so.
And that's it. And that's it. The other thing is, well, what if a person feels like they have gifts to do that? No one gets to do everything they feel like they're gifted at. No one does. What if a man who has several wives feels like he's gifted to be a pastor. The Bible says he must be the husband of one wife, right? So just because you feel like you're gifted to do something, that doesn't give you the right to overthrow biblical qualifications. So if the office is exclusively for men, and the Bible is very clear that women are not to teach or exercise authority over men, there's absolutely no room for women to be in that office or to exercise that authority in the church.
And that's it.
There's a lot of reasons why I don't deal with religion. There's also a lot of reasons why I don't talk about why I don't deal with religion. One is because I'm not about to go back and forth with anybody's mama, daddy, grandma, about why I believe what they believe and why they believe what they believe. At the end of the day, it's a core value. But what I will tell you is this. I saw this post and someone asked this question. They said, why is it that people that are in the church seem to be more judgmental than people that are not in the church? Why do they seem so devilish? Why do they seem like they're so manipulative? Well, because they're being manipulated. Because they're being judged. like that's why, right? When you go into the church, what they tell you is, come here with open arms. It's almost like you're being love bombed. Oh, come here with open arms. We love you. You can get this unconditional love if you meet these conditions. like ain't that crazy? It's like, you can come here and you can be loved and you can have everything that you need and you will have abundance and you will have this if you follow these rules, right? And that is then replicated in everything that we see, right? It's okay, well, you can have the marriage, you can have the love, you can have this, right? But if it doesn't meet these particular standards, then that can't be considered love. Now, what happens is that we are people of human nature, right? So we're going to do what we see. The environments that we are in, we're going to recreate them in our own little worlds, in our own little ways. So when you have a person that is consistently being judged, every thought they have is being judged, not only by people outside of them, but also in their own heads because they have been indoctrinated. So now they are in this spot where, oh my gosh, like, I want to be loved. I want to be closer to God. I want to show God. I want to show him how much I love him. I want to show him by being obedient. I want to show him by doing these things. And you really are actually developing a fear. Right? Because the fear deep down under that is that if I don't do these things that God is telling me to do, then he's not going to love me. I'm not going to get into heaven. And so what happens is that you take that mindset and you bring it out into the world. It's simple, right? I'm going to go out into the world and then I'm going to see you doing something and, oh my gosh, you shouldn't do that because if you do that, you might end up in a bad spot. And you don't want to end up in that spot. I know I ain't trying to be in a bad spot, so I don't want you to be in that bad spot. So now I'm going to judge you. And really the gag is that none of this is actually love, right? When you love somebody unconditionally, there is no ego. There is no, hey, you can't do that, or I'm not going to love you, or hey, you can't do this. That's called ownership. Okay, that's called ownership. That's not what real love really is. So when people ask this question and they're surprised about why are people in the church so judgy, it is because they are doing the exact thing they were taught to do. They are doing the exact thing that is being done to them. So anytime that somebody tells me that they're surprised that somebody didn't accept them with love that's in the church, I'm really trying to figure out when were they accepted for who they were in the church? They weren't, right? They get this self-righteous behavior because the more you act a certain way, then the more you're accepted in that community. But let's be real about it. You still fighting your demons and you still doing your thing, but then you're going to still be shunned. So if they're shunned, then you're shunned. And it's just kind of a pattern. And it's really, really simple. We just got to open our eyes to it. So religion, we can definitely blame religion, but we also have to look at what the system of religion is rooted in. The system of religion, and I'm particularly talking about Christianity, Catholicism, like all of these modern day religions are rooted in patriarchy. They're rooted in colonialism. And even before we get into colonialism, patriarchy is the biggest thing that we have to consider, because when you're evaluating a system, you have to evaluate that system for not necessarily what it appears to be, but what is it rooted in? And that will give you the answers for everything that you see right or wrong with that system. Because we have rooted everything in patriarchy, in the idea that men are the destined leaders. And that has put us in a situation where the feminine has been seen as less than and not able to contribute to the overall picture of moving the world forward. And not only just has the feminine been demonized in the sense of women, but it has been demonized in how we hold it as human beings for both men and women, right? We all have feminine energy and we all have masculine energy, and both are necessary and need to be in balance to move things forward. But when you have women, and I have to speak to the Black women, right? us as Black women have been put in situations where our femininity has made us so vulnerable that it's not safe. So now we believe that us being vulnerable, us receiving, us actually putting ourselves in a place where we are whole, right, and safe to be in our true nature is not safe for us. And men, because we have demonized femininity, don't know how to tap into their ability to be emotionally intelligent, their ability to lead with empathy and not lead with control. Because unfortunately, we see a lot of toxic uses of both femininity and masculinity in both men and women. And now we are at a spot where religion enforces these values. And because of that, we are continuously stuck, particularly if you are working with people that are so rooted in religion that they can't see past what the system of religion is rooted in.
There are two forms of leadership. The first, and by far the most effective, is leadership of consent of, and with the sympathy of the followers. Leadership with the consent of and the sympathy of the followers. The second is leadership by force, without the consent and sympathy of the followers. Then what they want to do? They want to force a woman into submission. They want to force women through brutality to follow them, right? That's why I asked them, what books on leadership have you read? Education, you keep going back. Yeah, because you need it, because y'all are sitting up here having unproductive conversations and you ain't got an ounce of leadership in you. And you don't even know where to start.
Do you know why God was giving him, him pronouns? Because a man made him up, baby. He was tired of seeing woman give birth and create, so he had to make up a story, baby. The first form of any deity was a woman, not a man. Men got jealous. Men wanted to create a system. Men were mad. They were like, all these women, they're bringing life onto the planet. They're giving birth. It's a miracle. I want to do something too. Let's form a secret society and create a religion. Because all the women are getting the attention. They're worshiping goddesses. They're giving birth. We need something. Let's create a male god. Like, oh, they bleed every month. Well, we're going to start using blood too. Let's make up a story about somebody getting the blood. Let's sacrifice some blood. You're going to drink this every month too. We can't bleed down there, so just find some blood somewhere. Like, cut your hand or something. That's literally how it went down. They was mad, so they wanted to join in, so they had to fake it till they never made it. They have to fake it. It's like fake. It's like the fake version of what women naturally are. That's all religion is. It's just a fake, synthetic version of what women are. And the funny thing is, I'm going to tell y'all, even the religious leaders who represent the actual religion have already figured it out. And they're just profiting off of it at this point. They already know it's a spiritual metaphor. It's this, it's that, it's meant to control. They already know once they get higher up, especially if nobody told them, they figured it out. But they're just going to collect the benefits from it. They're going to collect the money from it. They're going to collect the power from it. Because now they know something that the other people don't know. And so they'll just continue to represent it on a higher level in order to collect the benefits from it. But they don't really believe in this stuff, literally. Okay, because I've actually talked to a lot of high up religious people, and they don't believe in none of that stuff. They just, they'll say, I know. It's all metaphor. It's all symbolism. It's literally the same thing. I know. But they don't.
People bash religion, and I never got into that because of one thing. A lot of religion and rules. I know people like, oh, the rules are stupid. The rules are this. The rules is keeping some people from turning into wild, sheer animals and causing so much trouble roaming this earth. And that's just the facts. The rules is keeping a lot of folks and a lot of us in check, because without any rules, without any kind of standards, this out here would be like land of the dead. This would be like zombie land out here.
Sexless young men, typically throughout history, throughout time, have been the group to worry about. So strongly associated with violence that we call it the young male syndrome in our field, that this has always been a huge problem. Now, throughout history, you had kind of cultural or social institutions to deal with your population of incels. So, for example, the monastery would be one for sure, give a high status position to kind of channel these extra guys into. You'd create Vikings out of them. The Vikings were likely incels, not the sexy kind of Netflix Vikings that you think from the TV shows. The Portuguese explorers, there's strong evidence that they were incels, basically, sent on purpose missions to kind of basically get away from causing trouble around for everyone else.
I mean, can you define them as incels when sexual violence was a part of that conquest?
Right. So that's also a good point, that the motivation of acquiring mates has been a motivating factor for a lot of men to join terrorist groups. Even jihadi violence, it's the promise of brides in this life or the next. And when you talk to anthropologists who, there's one, Napoleon Chagnon, and he did some research with the Yanomamo, who are an extremely violent hunter-gatherer society in Bolivia. And he told them about why people in the West go to war, to spread democracy, free speech, things like this. And they were just falling off their chair laughing. They were like, what? Why would you? And he said, well, why do you go to war? And they were like, only one reason, to get mates.
Does anyone else ever think about how women weren't even allowed to have bank accounts or credit cards before 1974? Like, that is when the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed. Prior to that, women needed a man to act as a cosigner for them to get a loan or credit. They could also use women's marital status and pregnancy status against them in the employment process. So before this bill was passed, women actually needed a man, so like a husband, a father, a brother, to be a cosigner for them if they wanted a bank account, credit, or a loan. If a woman was married, she was actually legally required to ensure that her husband knew about her bank accounts or credit, etc. And they could use factors like a woman's potential to get pregnant against her when deciding if she was creditworthy. They assumed that once she got married, she was going to get pregnant, and so that was going to mean that her income was going to be less consistent. And in many cases, a woman's wages were actually considered her husband's property. And I again want to reiterate that this was 50 years ago. This was in 1974 that this started to change. So when we hear this discourse about how people used to value marriage and stay in their marriages longer, just remember that it wasn't necessarily that women were happier, that they didn't want to leave. It was that they literally couldn't.
In all social anthropology, men are busy trying to control other men, right? So the first laws are about incest. Do not screw your mother, okay? Do not screw your daughters. Do not screw your sisters. The laws are not really sisters stop screwing your brothers, okay? And mom stop screwing. It's not that way round. So the origin of law, when you look at it from a social anthropology point of view, it's men controlling men because we know we're out of control, right? We're just out of control. So the origin of law is about contracts between men. Now, women have come along and got wrapped up in that, and that's a different thing. But initially, the problem was never, how do we control women? It's like, how the hell do we control men? Okay, they're out of control. The young generations don't listen to the older ones. There are disputes over sexual jealousy between men. Okay, so we need to figure out the men. So that's 101 social anthropology. Freud comes along, and in Totem and Taboo, which was in 1913, he writes a book and says, okay, I'm going to have a look at the psychology of this, right? And he comes up with a bunch of ideas. And what he says is, men are clearly a problem. And he tries to look at the relationship between young men and their fathers. Okay? And he's saying, this is where I want to locate the psychological problem. There's something wrong with young men and their fathers. And there's something about young men that can't handle the fathers, and there's something about the fathers that can't handle the young men. So the fathers try to control the young men in the tribe or the village or whatever, okay? The young men resent it. So they want to kill the father. So laws are psychologically coming about because young men and old men are basically in a life and death struggle. Now, feminism came along and said, oh, Freud's talking rubbish because he doesn't involve women. And that's correct. He doesn't involve women, right? Doy, because women are not the problem.
Exactly.
The problem is with men. What did he say about men, right? He's saying they are seriously out of control sexually and in terms of aggression. And that's why they need laws. And we have this constant fight between the older men and the younger men. And that's a psychological problem right off the bat, just there, on the level of social anthropology. Okay,
That's interesting. My question to you is, after analyzing men, what do you think the likelihood is of men actually becoming consciously aware of their own behavior and noticing that it's a problem? Because we have a lot of men on the planet.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned Carl Jung, okay? Now, Jung had a different take to Freud, okay? He's saying, I can't believe that this is just biological. I can't believe this is just sexual. So he comes up with this idea about archetypes, okay? There are blueprints in the universe, okay, psychically, of male and female contrasexual archetypes, okay, that live in all of us, okay? But if you're a man, you're going to have a male archetype as the dominant, okay? And you're going to look for the feminine archetype. And women are going to look for the male archetype, all right? So Jung is working at that level. Now, in the Jungian model, change is only going to come when that archetype gets so negative, creates so much pain, that it throws the male psyche into crisis. And that's what you're seeing now, is that men are having to face an unprecedented crisis, which I think a lot of your viewers already know. So it's a situation where women are more intelligent, they're performing better in educational circles, they are starting to get jobs, even though there are issues with gender diversity and pay gap and so on, okay? But they are making progress. They're getting financial economic independence, so they don't have to put up with men anymore, okay? So when did this happen? So there is a massive shift in the collective psyche that's going on societally, and it has come about, that's one of the benefits of capitalism, is that if you have the cash as a woman, you don't have to put out with a man. And that's what's hurting the men a lot. Okay, and that I think is what the Andrew Tate stuff and the whole men's movement trying to rally around that is trying. It's a defensive move. Okay, it's like, whoa, we're losing our power. We don't have the social structures anymore. These women are becoming too independent. God damn the feminists. So now we have to mobilize. But they can't mobilize because this is a historical force that's too big for them.